Well, I'm just going to sit here for a few minutes and enjoy a cup of coffee and talk fishing for just a little while. Uh, let me start this thing out by saying that anything that I have to say about fishing, how to fish and how to go about it and all that kind of stuff, that's not my opinions. Not my opinions at all. What they are, those words and anything that I say, came straight from Buck Perry's findings. They're facts. They're not opinions, they're facts. They've been proven out since 1946. Since 1946, the knowledge of how to catch any kind of fish anywhere in the world at any time of the year has been out there, it's been available. And Buck went around the country teaching it. And anything I have to say is not from me. I'm simply repeating what Buck said. So if you have a problem with it, you don't like it, don't fuss at me. Take it up with Buck. But Buck, the greatest fisherman that ever lived, died in 2005 at age 90. We lost the best fisherman we'll ever see. But he left his knowledge here for anybody that's willing to put out the effort to learn it. We're very fortunate for that. And Buck turned his business over. When he died, he willed his business, buckspoonplugs.com, which is where you need to go to find his printed material, where you can get the book that he wrote called Knowledge is the Key to Fishing Success, and you can get Buck Perry's Complete School of Fishing. You can go get that at buckspoonplugs.com. And Buck had some teachers, some instructors that went around the country teaching his school of fishing. And one of them was Don Dixon. And Don Dixon has put up on YouTube the complete Buck Perry Complete School of Fishing. And you can sit on your couch, drinking a beer, and learn how to catch any kind of fish anywhere in the world, any time of the year. You can do that by going to Don Dixon Fishing on YouTube. Do yourself a favor and do that. Now, last year I put up a series of videos on fishing, and just about most every video that I put up on fishing contains scenes from trolling. And and I put up, as you watch those videos, let me just say that watch my left hand, the hand of which is on the tiller arm of my boat, the hand that controls the boat. Watch that hand. My left hand is doing with that boat what the feel from my right hand tells it to do. In other words, I've got the correct line, rod, and plug that I'm trolling with, and my right hand is feeling what that plug is telling me. And depending upon what that plug is telling me, I do with my left hand to cause the plug to do whatever it is that it needs to be done that my right hand's telling me. So whatever my right hand tells me is what my left hand does. And I've practiced this for so many years, for so long, I can just go down the bank, just looking around, enjoying the scenery and stuff, and just automatically do the correct thing with the boat. But that did not come easy. It took lots and lots of practice. So watch that left hand. Now, I recently put up a video on fishing success is simple, and I got a comment on it. And that comment was, I forgot one very important thing in that video, and that is that trolling sucks. Now, why he said trolling sucks, why he thinks trolling sucks, I don't know. He didn't bother to say. He just said it sucks. So, to him, I guess it sucks for whatever reason. But his comments reflects 50 years of scoffing, literally scoffing. And I will say this, he's probably a bass fisherman, and I'll get around to that a little later. But for 50 years, I've been making good catches, coming back to the boat ramp or the boat dock and all that stuff. and people ask you how you caught them or what you caught them on, and then they just can't believe it, and then they just scoff at it and make snide remarks and go on. And the most common thing they say when you tell them, how you did, they say, "Well, I don't troll." And in this video, Fishing Success is Simple, the one previous to this, I get into pretty good length on telling a story about a local fishing show host that he didn't make a catch either that day, and he told me, well, he didn't troll. Like for somehow or another, trolling is beneath them or something. Like they stepped on a snake or farted in church or something. It's just something you not do. And it's crazy why they don't troll. So when I ask them, well, when they say, "Well, I don't troll," and my answer back to them is, why? Why don't you troll? And they said, well, typically, my club don't allow it. And I say, why not? Why don't your club allow trolling? They don't know. They really don't know. What they just know. There is a reason. If it's not allowed, you probably ought to try to figure it out. But now, primarily bass clubs don't allow trolling. Other clubs and species do, like crappie and walleye and tuna and marlin and all that kind of stuff. They allow trolling, but bass tournaments don't. And I'll get into why that in a little later. But if they don't allow it, is it because it's useless, or is it because of a waste of time, or is it ineffective? No. It's barred because it is effective. It is super effective, and therefore it's barred. But we'll get into why it's barred very shortly. Okay, we'll cover that. But who was the first person to ever suggest that you ban trolling during a tournament? It was Dwight Eisenhower, President Eisenhower. Dwight Eisenhower was a spoon plugger. Now, spoon plugger is the word that Buck Perry coined. That is a fisherman who goes about his fishing in a logical, orderly, systematic manner in order to eliminate the unproductive water and arrive at the fish in the shortest possible period of time. That's spoon plugger. So Dwight Eisenhower, President Eisenhower, was a spoon plugger. And he got the idea that in order to further good relations around the world, that he would invite all these dignitaries from all these different countries, 6 top countries around the world, to participate in fishing tournaments. So that would be a good way for everybody to get to know each other. It'd be a good thing. We all know that getting together fishing, each other getting together fishing is a good deal. So that's what President Eisenhower wanted to do. But he went to Buck and he said, "Buck, how are we going to keep your spoon pluggers from winning all these tournaments?" And Buck said, "You can't." Eisenhower said, "Well, we need to. We have to. We can't just let these spoon pluggers, these followers of yours, win all the tournaments. We have to do something." So Buck thought about it overnight, and he got a hold of Eisenhower the next day, and he said, "Ban trolling. Don't let them troll. Take away the spoon plugger's primary tool that he uses to find and locate the fish with. If you take away that primary tool, you will handicap the spoon plugger dramatically. That's the only way that I know of that you can even come close to leveling the field." He said, "But these spoon pluggers, people that have knowledge of fish and fish movement, are still going to win tournaments. But they won't win as many if you take away their primary tool." So that's what they did. So the banning of trolling come from the very guy who preached how important it is. But it was for a particular reason. So when these clubs around the country and everything, they get to looking, well, if this big time clubs that the president puts on bans trolling, then we need to ban it. They ban trolling. So if banning trolling levels the playing field as such, then it must be more effective than casting. Well, Buck will tell you that it's at least 50-50, 50% trolling, 50% casting. Actually, it's more than that. It's actually really more than that. He's really being kind there. Trolling is probably a 90-10 thing, but at least trolling is super important, super important. That is the correct trolling. So it's banned because it is effective. And why do local clubs ban trolling? Then it got started because it just seemed to be the thing to do, because that's what the president was doing and that's what he advocated, you know? So that's where it got started. But that didn't where it stopped. Why do local clubs ban trolling today? Today. They're not interested in leveling the field. They're not interested in teaching you how to catch fish. Local clubs ban trolling because the pros ban trolling. Now, why do the pros ban trolling? Money. Simple as that. Money. Fishing, particularly bass fishing, has become a multi-billion-dollar business, a huge business. And they know big money is what bans trolling. It's sales. The pro fisherman is first and foremost a salesman. When you see all those patches on it, and he's sponsored by this, that, and the other one, he's got to sell products in order to get his paycheck. Do you think he's interested in you catching fish? He's interested in selling his boss's products, the ones that's writing his check. That's what he's wanting to do. And that is big business. Big business. So Buck turned down all sorts of probably more offers of sponsorship than probably anybody in history. I turned down multiple offers to be sponsored on the Pro Tournament Trail years ago. I turned it down for the same reason that Buck did. This is something that you do for fun. Knowledge is what catches fish. Neither Buck nor I wanted to be obligated to anybody as a salesman. Just not going to do it. I'm not going to take something that's fun and turn it into a job and where I've got to push a product, not what really catches fish. I'm just not going to do it. Buck made a living selling knowledge. I made a living as a carpenter, okay? But don't let big business, for heaven's sake, don't let big business limit your success. Don't do that. Cast or troll? That's a question. Listen, to be consistently successful, you have to do both. It's not what you like to do, what you prefer to do, or anything else. In order to be consistently successful, you have to be able to troll and cast. You have to. You will never, ever be consistently successful by doing just one. There's a place for both. A time and a place for both. You will never be consistently successful by doing just one. You will never be. But to be really successful, you need to be willing and able to use every tool at your disposal. Every tool to catch fish at your disposal. That includes bait, both dead bait and live bait. You need to learn how to be a good bait fisherman, because there is a time when bait fishing will outproduce anything. There's a time when dead bait just laying still on the bottom of the lake, will outproduce anything. Then there's a time when live bait will outproduce anything. So in order to be successful, you need to learn this stuff and be able to implement it. And you need to be able to use all 4 types of artificials. Artificial lures are divided into just 4 categories. Just 4 categories. You've got surface lures, which are a ball to use. I absolutely love to use surface lures. When it's productive, it is productive and it is fun. But it's only productive on a very, very short period of time out of the year. Then you need to be able to use weedless lures. You need some weedless lures, because some areas and some lakes and some bodies of water are just choked with weeds and sticks and stumps and brush. You have to have something to come through that stuff. But there again, they're only a very low percentage of the time. In our lakes, the lakes that I fish around here, they're sterile lakes. They don't have weeds. Not a single 30,000 acre lake don't have a single weed in it. It's clean bottoms. And yet you see our fishermen, most of our fishermen, are using what they see the pros using, and the pros are using it back in the weeds and stuff, the lily pads and all that stuff. And they're throwing weedless jigs, plastic worms, and spinner baits. And these guys are out here. These lures are all very limited when it comes to the 2 things that really catch fish, and that's depth and speed. Those lures are very limited when it comes to that. Yet, fishermen out here on my lakes, my local lakes, are running around using those very limited lures in water that's clean and wide open. Why? Because they're the pros with all those patches on them and all those fancy boats are using them. So that's what they do. They're copying their heroes. And their choice of lures and stuff and their ways of fishing is very limited. But in order to be successful, you got to be versatile. You got to be able to be willing and able and know how to use whatever it is it's going to take, whatever it's going to do it takes to catch fish that day. You simply got to be able and willing to do that. And the next category of lures is the jump type lures. That's any kind of a lure that you use the rod to impart the speed and action to, which generally includes like jigs, plastic worms, blade baits, things of that nature. My favorite jump bait, generally speaking, would be a blade bait. That's my favorite because I'm using it here in open water. And it's a very effective jump type lure. So you've got the dead bait, live bait. In order of speed, the slowest is dead bait. The next up the speed scale is live bait. The next up the speed scale, the next fastest is a jump type lure. And then you come to our main lure. That's free running, bottom bumping lures. This is our main lure. This is our main tool. This is the main thing that we're going to use both trolling and casting to locate the fish. You have to include this. This is the most important category of lures there is. Free running, bottom bumping. Now you eliminate a whole lot of lures when you add the words bottom bumping, because a lot of them are just not made. They just won't handle bumping into the bottom. But your free running lure needs to be able to make contact with the bottom. It needs to be able to bounce off that bottom. It needs to be strong enough, sturdy enough to bounce off the bottom and still run true. So free running, bottom bumping lures is our next category. We have to have this category. So simply put, being versatile has a whole lot to do with how much success you're going to have. If you're versatile, if you're willing and able, you're set up to where you can. If you're willing and able to use all the tools at your disposal to catch fish, then your success ratio is going to be quite good. But if you're limited, very limited, if you choose to limit your approach to fishing, then you limit the amount of success you're going to have. But if you're happy with that, all well and good. No problem with that whatsoever. Being single-minded limits your success. In other words, you want to go about fishing for a certain kind of fish in a certain way. That's fine and dandy. That's your choice and more power to you. I do that too to quite some extent. Back for many years, I lived on one of the top 10 trout streams in the United States. I fly fished that river for 35 years. And in 35 years, I only saw five fly fishermen. It's the best kept secret in the world. It was awesome fishing. And I fished it all. I dead drift, upstream dead drift nymph fish, which is the hardest to master of all the fly fishing disciplines that I came upon was that. And I used wet flies and streamers, and I used it all. But I got to where I absolutely preferred, hands down preferred dry fly fishing. And it got to the point, if they weren't going to hit dry flies, then I just wasn't going to catch them. I got so set in my ways that I like catching them on the dry fly so much that if they weren't up hitting on the dry fly, I'd just go back home and I'd wait till they did. But I was very fortunate. On that river, there was pretty good dry fly fishing year round, 365 days a year. There was always a midge hatch. It happened every day. You was always midges. Then at other times of year, you had the good dry or mayfly hatches and all that stuff. And you had phenomenal fishing. So I did absolutely, by choice, limit the way I fish. And that was dry fly fishing for trout. So if you want to limit yourself to casting for bass or whatever, that's perfectly fine. Nothing wrong with that. But just realize that you are limiting yourself. Your overall success rate is going to be down. But if that's your choice and you understand it, that's perfectly fine. But if you're doing that because some marketing specialist up at some of these big companies is trying to convince you that you should not be trolling, don't let yourself be duped into that. If you make that decision, you make that decision. Don't let some marketing expert with a big fancy suit limit your fishing. If your fishing is going to be limited to a certain way and a certain thing, you limit it. Don't let somebody else do it for you. But me, I'm not willing to be limited most of the time. The vast majority of the time, I want to catch fish, and I'll do whatever it takes. But like I said, out there on that river, I chose to limit myself to dry flies. That's what I did, and I did it by choice. And another choice that I often make, I'll go to the lake, and I know that it's not good fishing. It's not good conditions. I know that. But I make that choice deliberately to do one thing, troll for stragglers. Because on some days, that's the easiest way there is. You're going to be beating your brains out trying to make a catch because the fishing conditions are just terrible. So I literally make a choice to do one simple thing. I limit myself to trolling for stragglers. So there's nothing wrong with limiting yourself if you do the limiting. Just don't let somebody else do the limiting for you. It's that simple. But if you want to be successful all the time, that's your desire, and you choose equipment that prevents you from being successful all the time, that's not a good deal. That's not a good deal. If your equipment, the equipment you choose, primarily your boat will be the most important decision that you make. And if your boat, your equipment prevents you from effectively fishing all depths and all speeds, then that equipment that you pay good money for will limit your success. So you may get mad when you hear that, but that's not me. I didn't say that. Buck said it. It's true. And Buck said the day that you purchase a bass boat is going to be the day that you put a limit on how good a fisherman you'll ever be. He was absolutely telling the truth. I didn't like hearing it. I went out and thought he's got to be wrong about this. I went out and I bought a bass boat. My fish catch went to the basement. So the next year I get another bass boat. My fish catch stayed in the basement. So next year I buy another bass boat and it stayed in the basement. Then I built me a boat and my catch stayed in the basement. Finally I come to my senses and had to admit that my choice of boat was absolutely killing my fishing. Because what it did, the bass boat prevented me from trolling effectively. Trolling effectively. Not just dragging a lure around behind the boat. That's not trolling. That's dragging a lure behind the boat. I'm talking about precision trolling. Having your lure exactly where you want it. And when you watch my left hand on this tiller, I'm making all kinds of little adjustments, constantly making little adjustments. That's to keep my lure where I want it. That only comes from practice, hours and hours and hours of practice. It's difficult to do, it's difficult to learn, but it can be learned. But you can't do it with a bass boat. You simply can't do it. You cannot do it with any boat that has remote steering. It's just that simple. Not just bass boats, it's any boat that has remote steering. You cannot keep that lure that's running 30, 40, 50 yards behind your boat in an exact position. It can't be done. Buck couldn't do it. I can't do it. You can't do it. So if you choose a bass boat and all that comfort, everything else, realize that you are limiting yourself to casting and casting only. And trolling, by and large, day in and day out, is so much more effective than casting. You primarily troll to locate the fish. And then you locate the fish. If you locate a school of fish, then wear them out casting. That's the object of it. Locate them. By trolling, you can cover more water faster than you ever thought about being able to do casting. You can locate the fish. It's the quickest, most effective way for you to locate the fish. Then once you locate them, catch them any way you want. Cast and troll, continue trolling, start casting, do whatever you want. But realize that if you make the decision to buy a boat that will not allow you to precision troll, you made the decision to limit yourself. Now in this clip, this bit of footage is coming up right here. It's going to be about 7 minutes or so long. It's not edited. I didn't edit it at all. I just let the camera run. And this is typical of stuff that happens to a spoon plugger. This same thing happened to me several times this day. On this particular day, I hooked 45 good fish, and I landed 37. I let a few of them get off the line. But this catching one fish going this way and turning around and coming back that way, catching another and turning around going back that way, and catching another and turning around and coming back this way, catching another. It happens several times. Now, if these fish had been tightly schooled when I located them, I would have wore them out casting. I'd have eased back in and cast into them and wore them out casting, which I tried. which I tried. Believe me, when I found these fish, I tried casting, but they were not tightly schooled. There were several of them scattered along a section of shoreline. That section of shoreline may be 100 yards long. It might be 200 yards long. It may be 50 yards long. But if I had tried to cast it, I would have caught precious few fish, and I knew it. But if they had been tightly schooled, I would have stayed in one spot, casting to that spot, and catch fish after fish. That just was not there today. They were scattered. I knew they were scattered. So what did I do? I decided to troll. I just kept trolling for them. Back and forth, back and forth. So sit back, watch this little segment, and realize that this kind of fish, it happens only to a spoon plugger, a person who's gained enough knowledge, who was taught enough knowledge. Not you got it yourself, you learned it from someone else. I learned it from Buck Perry, that I knew what I was doing. I knew what the fish were doing. I knew what they were doing that day. I knew why they were doing it. And I took advantage of it. I knew that I'd located a section of shoreline that had several fish scattered along it, not tightly schooled, but scattered along it. So I employed the technique it's going to take to catch them. Casting was not it. Trolling was. So that's what I'm doing today. I'm simply doing what I was taught to do. And believe you me, it's fun. It is fun. And if you've never experienced speed trolling, or trolling at a high rate of speed, and today, right now, I'm trolling at about 5.5 miles an hour. The water is not super warm yet, but it's warm enough that I have to have my speed up around 5.5 miles an hour in order to force the fish to hit my lure. And I'm going 5.5 miles an hour, which is pretty doggone fast. I've got a short, stiff rod, and I got a line that has no stretch in it. And when these fish hit, these hybrids in particular, they are the hardest hitting, hardest fighting fish that I know of in freshwater. And when you're going that kind of speed, and one of these gentlemen slams into your plug, it's jolting. You go from total complacency, if you want to put it that way, you're just sitting there enjoying the scenery, and all of a sudden, bang! Man, it'll jar you to your eye teeth. You'll get to where you live for that strike. That strike is amazing. You'll learn to live for that. It's just, to me, it's pretty much like living for that big brown trout sipping that dry fly off the surface. But my gosh, the jolt of these fish. It's quite addictive. It's quite addictive. If you've never experienced it, you ought to once. You ought to really experience it. Now, catching and casting, yeah, it's a blast. It's a ball. But you don't get that same jolt that you do at high-speed trolling with an outfit that has virtually no stretch. It's quite incredible. If you ever do it, you'll enjoy it. That much I'll guarantee you. So, just watch this. I mean, this happened. This is real life. This is real time as it really happened. No editing, no nothing to this segment. And like I said, I experienced this on this particular day several times that day. And on several instances, I would catch 4 or 5, not just 3. I would catch 4 or 5 in a short section of bait. Catch one going this way, one coming this way, one going this way and coming back. I mean, it's not unusual. This is a normal for a knowledgeable spoon plugger. It just happens. It happens. It'll happen to you so many times you lose count. This is kind of stuff that I used to dream about, just couldn't imagine. And now it happens routinely. It's a routine thing. Yet to most people, and it was to me until Buck showed me different. Remember, at one time, for a long time, I used to go fishing and I'd catch my limit. Just about every time I went, my limit was one. Not the state limit, my limit was one. If I caught it on the first cast, when I got to the lake, I might as well turn around and go home. Or other times, I might stay out there 10, 12, 14 hours, casting my hind end off, till I finally caught my limit, which was one fish. But after getting into studying buck and becoming a spoon plugger, I never wonder if I'm going to catch fish. I know I'm going to catch fish. It's just a matter of when and how many. And fishing like this becomes old hat. It becomes normal. It doesn't become unusual. It becomes normal. So become a spoon plugger and start enjoying fishing just like this. Back in 1970, somewhat by accident, well, it wasn't an accident. I found a fishing digest, Tom McNally's Fishing Digest, and there was an article in that big old book written by a man named Don Nichols, who was an airline pilot from Chicago. And he wrote an article on catching fish. Actually, he's catching bass that day. That's what he was fishing for. And it's the first thing, you got to remember, I read everything I get my hands on pertained to fishing. If it pertained to fishing, by golly, I was studying and I was reading it. Well, this is the first thing I ever read that made sense about fishing. It was logical. It made sense. I knew that the guy knew what he was talking about. It just made perfectly good sense. He was trolling the shallows and he located a few fish scattered along the shallows. And he said that told him that there was a structure in the area that led those fish to that area. So he proceeded to go about a procedure where he located the structure, mapped it, laid it out, knew what it was, and dropped a marker buoy at the contact point on that structure. The contact point was 15 foot deep. Now he was using spoon plugs in the shallows that gave him the indication that there was a structure nearby. And when he located and marked this contact point at 15 feet, he got out another spoon plug that ran to 15-foot depth. He laid off and he made a trolling run, aiming his lure some 45 to 50 yards behind his boat at that point, at contact point on that bar. And then when his lure hit the bar, it started to walk in the bar, he felt the fish take. It was a good 5-pound small or largemouth. Then he goes back and he sets up an anchoring position in the shallower water where he was casting this same spoon plug, casting it out, letting it sink to the bottom beyond the school of fish. Then he walked it up the slope, across the tip of the bar, across the contact point, through the school of bass, and proceeded to sit there and catch one bass after another. It just made sense. I knew the guy knew what he was talking about. And he talked about structure fishing and spoon plugs. He talked about structure fishing, the father of modern structure fishing, Buck Perry. So he gave the address, Buck's Bait. At the time, it was Buck's Baits. So I contacted Buck's Baits. I ordered from Buck a 5-pack spoon plug. I didn't have the whole equipment, but I ordered 5 spoon plugs. And there's a little booklet in there that's kind of describing the movement of fish on a seasonal basis. And for the next, this was 1970, and from 70 to 73, I could catch fish in the winter. because there was a drawing in that little pamphlet that I knew a place exactly like that on one of my lakes. And I would go there and I would catch lots of fish, at least lots of fish to me during the winter. But when the water warmed up, man, I was lost. I was lost. So I lived for winter. I could catch them in the winter, but when the good fishing, what Buck called good fishing, the summer, the warmer water come along, I was lost. I couldn't catch them. But in 1973, Buck he put it all together in a book form. And believe you me, I got one of the very first books that Buck wrote, and it had the whole ball of wax put together. So finally, I was able to put fish movement together on a seasonal movement and daily movement. And then I began to follow step by step the instructions that Buck put out there for me. And I began to catch fish like I'd never dreamed about catching fish. It was wonderful. I mean, I could catch fish on a year-round basis. And over the next, since 1973, and this year's 2023, so that's 50 years. Over the next 50 years, I can't even begin to tell you how many fish I've caught. Countless, innumerable fish, thousands upon thousands of fish, all because that I followed the teachings of one man. Nothing particular for me. It's all Buck Perry. I give him the full credit. I'm doing exactly what the man told me to do. So after doing that for nearly 10 years, I went over to meet the man at Buck Perry. I went over to meet him over at his place in Hickory, North Carolina. And I went there to tell him, to thank him for all, literally tens of thousands of fish that I'd been catching, that I wouldn't have caught any without him. You know what the man said? He said, but you had to interpret it. I said, Buck, but you understand, I'm trying to tell you, all these fish that I've caught, I never would have caught these fish without you. There's no way on earth I would have caught them without your teaching. And 3 times I tried to tell him that, and 3 times he told me that I had to interpret it. And then he said, if you ever try to teach this stuff, you're going to see what I'm talking about. It's going to be like preaching to a brick wall. And of course, when I went over to meet him and thank him, he had just put out his full School of Fishing. So I bought it. I bought one of his absolute very first editions, which is a 9-volume edition of Buck Perry School of Fishing. And Buck, he signed it. He signed it, and he put a little note in it. He said, I don't know what's the hardest thing to do, to teach people the truth about the Lord or the truth about fishing. Good luck in your fishing. Buck Perry. P.S. Save some of those Tennessee fish for me. That's what he put in this book for me. I cherish that. And over the years, we corresponded, and he'd have me check out certain things for him on certain lakes. And if I had a problem, I'd ask him, and he'd solve it for me. I never fished with him, never once. But we corresponded, we were friends, and he helped me immensely. But now, you have the opportunity to go to YouTube and look up Don Dixon Fishing and have Don teach you all of what Buck Perry School of Fishing is. Do yourself a favor, do that. But the modern fisherman, even, like I said, all modern fishing owes its existence to Buck and his findings and his teachings. But people today, even the nomenclature that we use today, the words that we use to describe our fishing are words and phrases coined by Buck Perry, such as structure. So Buck Perry was a structure fisherman. I was a structure fisherman. But you hear these pros and these people on TV, these people that's got shows, people that make a good living fishing, talking about structure, and they have no earthly idea what they're talking about. If they really understood what structure fishing is, they'd realize how absolutely silly they sound. They're using words coined by the daddy of structure fishing, putting themselves out to be structure fishermen, and they don't even know what structure is. To the average fisherman on TV, structure is anything that ain't water. Anything that ain't water is structure to them. That's not true. Structure, as defined by the daddy of structure fishing, is a feature of the bottom, different to the surrounding area, that the fish can use, recognize, and use. They can follow it, and it must, absolutely must, lead all the way from the deep water to the shallow water. If it don't do that, it might look pretty and it might be all kinds of things, but if it does not lead all the way from deep water to shallow water, it will not be productive. Then once you learn how to recognize what structure is and realize that around the world, in the entire world, there's only 17 different kinds of structure. And Don Dixon will teach you what all 17 types of those structures are. There's only 17. And in each type of lake, there's only like natural lakes, man-made lakes in flatlands, man-made lakes in hill country, man-made lakes in mountain country. There's no other places you can build a reservoir. But at all these combined, all these reservoirs and natural lakes, there's only 17 different types of structures. And each type of lake will only contain a few of those structures. So you'll learn what type of lake you're fishing. You'll know which of those 17 structures are in your lake. You'll go about in a systematic manner, a systematic way of locating those structures. And once you locate the structures, you've located the fish. It's that simple. So, the primary purpose of trolling, and if you're going to be successful at fishing, you have to troll. The primary purpose of trolling is to locate structure. And then when you locate structure, you've located the fish. You've located their migration route. You've located that feature that they use to go from their home, where they're out there sleeping, they're out there dormant sleeping, out there in that deep water, that you will learn how to recognize the route that they take from their bedroom to their kitchen. That's what structure is. It's the route that the fish take from their bedroom to the kitchen. You'll learn how to locate that. And then trolling is extremely effective on those days, which are numerous, when the fishing is just terrible. You can go out and cast your rear end off, but you're not going to make a catch. But if you're equipped and able to troll, you can put on a shallow running lure, such as a 500, a 400, or a 250 spoon plug. You can troll those shallows, and even on the worst days out there, generally speaking, you can still put together a reasonable catch. If you catch 2 or 3 and everybody else caught nothing, you were successful. So do yourself a favor, learn how to become a spoon plugger yourself, and your fishless days will be few and far between. Good luck in your fishing, and we'll talk soon.